Hey everybody, Rick here. On September 11th, 2001, I was stationed at the Pentagon running the communications systems for the Army Operations Center. For the 20th anniversary of that horrific day, I decided it was time to dust off my notes and revisit those memories to see what insights I could pull from my experience. I'll be sharing those thoughts about the events of 9/11 and their aftermath tomorrow on the CSO Perspectives podcast. For Pro subscribers, it will automatically show up in your feed. For everybody else, you can sign up for the CSO Perspectives public version in your favorite podcast app or wherever you get your podcast from.
And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud. Stolen credentials are an open door to your corporate assets. SpyCloud is the world leader in recapturing breach data and making it actionable to prevent cyber attacks. SpyCloud solutions protect your employee's identity and prevent criminals from using employee credentials to commit account takeover, data breaches, BEC, and ransomware attacks. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire to check your breach exposure now and see how global businesses are using SpyCloud to negate the value of their employees' stolen data. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show. The SEC's inquiry into the SolarWinds incident may expose other unrelated data breaches. Researchers identify an IoT botnet responsible for DDoS attacks against a number of banks. German prosecutors have opened an investigation into the GhostWriter campaign. Researchers look at the cozy, implausibly deniable relationship between Russia's security services and cyber gangs. A money launderer gets 11 years. David Dufour from Webroot has straight talk about paying the ransom. Our guest is Jeff Williams from Contrast Security with a look at AppSec Observability. Congratulations to the SINET 16 winners. And we remember 9/11. Hard to believe it's already been 20 years. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Friday, September 10th, 2021. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, best known by its acronym SEC, is investigating the SolarWinds incident, and Reuters reports that the inquiry is spooking some large U.S. companies who fear that the results of the probe will expose them to liability. Reuters says, quote, "The SEC is asking companies to turn over records into any other data breach or ransomware attack dating back to October 2019 if they downloaded a bugged network management software update from SolarWinds Corporation, which delivers products used across corporate America, according to details of the letters shared with Reuters. It's the any other that's got companies spooked. They're unsure what the consequences may be if the inquiry turns up previously undisclosed data breaches. There may be some clarity forming around the distributed denial of service attacks that have hit organizations including Russia's Yandex, New Zealand's ANZ Bank, which went down again yesterday, according to the New Zealand Herald, and other targets in the US and the UK. QRadar Labs today released a description of Meris, an IoT botnet with 250,000 devices. There have been larger botnets. Mirai, for one, had in excess of 300,000. But unlike its well-known predecessors, Meris relies on transmitting a high number of requests per second. The record describes the difference between Meris and the usual sort of DDoS attack like this, quote, "Called volumetric or application layer DDoS attacks, RPS attacks are different because attackers focus on sending requests to a target server in order to overwhelm its CPU and memory. Instead of clogging its bandwidth with junk traffic, volumetric attacks focus on occupying servers' resources and eventually crashing them." End quote. Most of the devices exploited to form the botnet were networking gear from the Latvian vendor MikroTik. Items include routers, IoT gateways, Wi-Fi access points, switches, and mobile networking gear. The record reports that sources tell it the target of the Yandex DDoS attack wasn't Yandex itself, but rather a bank that used Yandex's cloud services to host its e-banking portal. German prosecutors have opened an investigation into the GhostWriter campaign Berlin has attributed to Russian intelligence services, Der Spiegel reports. Germany's foreign ministry has warned that Russia will face unspecified consequences should the cyber espionage and election-related disinformation persist. Recorded Future's Insikt Group yesterday issued a report on what it calls the dark covenant between Russian intelligence services and cybercriminals. The security organs aren't directing the criminals, but the gangs operate at their sufferance and shape their operations and target selection to conform to their understanding of what those services want. It's too soon to tell whether U.S. carrots and sticks will inhibit the privateering, but the Insikt report thinks there are signs Russian President Putin is feeling some pressure to make a gesture in the direction of international good citizenship. The report's executive summary says, quote, "The open assertion made by U.S. President Joe Biden that Russian cybercriminals are protected by the Russian government has placed Russian President Vladimir Putin on the defensive." The report adds that this is forcing Russian domestic law enforcement to demonstrate that they are cracking down on ransomware operators. U.S. cyber czar Chris Inglis cautions against expecting any quick Russian reform or a departure from long-standing Russian intelligence and security practices. He sees deterrence in cyberspace as complicated. It's not, he thinks, a problem we're going to shoot our way out of. A cyber criminal associated with North Korean hackers, Galeb Alamari, a native of Mississauga, Ontario, and 36 years young, has been awarded an 11-year sabbatical courtesy of the U.S. Bureau of Prisons. Mr. Alamari, who holds both U.S. and Canadian citizenship, took a guilty plea to 2 federal counts of money laundering. The U.S. Attorney for the Central District of California explained that Mr. Alamari received funds from bank cyber heists and fraud schemes, and once the ill-gotten funds were in accounts he controlled, Alamari further laundered the funds through wire transfers, cash withdrawals, and by exchanging the funds for cryptocurrency. The funds included those from North Korean perpetrated crimes, including the 2019 cyber heist of a Maltese bank and the 2018 ATM cash-out theft from Bank Islami in Pakistan. Other victims of Alamari's crimes include a bank headquartered in India, as well as companies in the U.S., the U.K., individuals in the U.S., and a professional soccer club in the United Kingdom. Mr. Alamari's North Korean friends, the Hidden Cobra Gang, are generally held to be connected to the Lazarus Group and to be stealing on behalf of the Kim regime in Pyongyang. He's thought to have collaborators elsewhere, too. One of his co-conspirators is allegedly the Nigerian social media star influencer Ramon Olaronwa Abbas, known by his hacker name Ray Hushpuppy, or just Hushpuppy for short. Mr. Puppy is also currently in U.S. custody. The SINET 16 were announced this week. This annual competition has for years brought some of the most promising startups in cybersecurity into the spotlight. This year's winners, in reverse alphabetical order, are Valtix, specialists in multi-cloud network security whose solution promises both simplicity and adaptability; Strata, which delivers enterprise identity management also for multi-cloud environments; Sevco Security, provider of asset inventory necessary for the dynamic self-awareness necessary to security; Security, with a final I, offering artificial intelligence solutions for security, privacy, governance, and compliance for multi-cloud, SaaS, and self-managed data systems; Perimeter 81, which has a secure access service edge platform designed to support a remote workforce; Pentera, an automated pen testing shop for safe emulation of attacks; Jupiter One, an asset management company that provides security context to cloud users; Inky, the Maryland-based anti-phishing company whose cloud-based artificial more-than-intelligence spots fraud and social engineering in email; Gray Noise, whose solution tells security practitioners what they don't have to worry about, saving labor by cutting down on false alerts and security noise. Grammatech, developer of software assurance tools and advanced cybersecurity solutions designed to ease the challenges of DevSecOps. For All Secure, which offers application testing intended to make developers' lives easier. Ermetic, whose solution offers multi-cloud continuous protection for users of AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. Sequence Security, who offers a complete API inventory and data leak protection solution. Baffle, a cloud data protection shop that offers data tokenization, de-identification, and database encryption to protect data from source to destination. Axis Security, a zero-trust secure access service edge provider whose agentless solution enables secure employee access. AppOmni, whose SaaS security management platform delivers visibility into security configurations, user permissions, and third-party apps. This year, SINET singled out 3 companies to watch, early-stage startups it regards as already adding value. Scythe, an adversary emulation platform, Deep Factor, which offers continuous AppSec observability, and Corsia, multi-factor authentication for machine-to-machine communications. Congratulations to all of them, winners and honorable mentions alike. The SINET 16 companies have over the years assembled an enviable record of success and a reputation for successful innovation, and the class of 2021 are likely to continue that tradition. And finally, tomorrow is the 20th anniversary of 9/11, Al-Qaeda's terror attacks against the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, attacks that took the lives of thousands in New York and Arlington, and hundreds aboard the 4 airliners the terrorists hijacked and drove into the ground. Our CSO and senior fellow Rick Howard was in the Pentagon that day, and he's posted an essay on what he saw and how he remembers it. All of us old enough to remember the attacks have our own recollections of that day. Tomorrow, we'll be sparing a thought for those who died, both immediately and in the aftermath, and for the heroism of those who responded, both immediately and during the global war on terror that followed. And now, a word from our sponsor, Recorded Future. Recorded Future will be hosting their incredibly valuable intelligence summit, Predict, on October 12th and 13th, 2021. During this virtual event, speakers and sessions will explore how intelligence empowers defenders with the visibility to make faster, smarter, more confident decisions. Join us as we feature thought-provoking keynote speakers such as Sir Alex Younger and Frank Abagnale. And this year, there will be more than 40 breakout sessions that could be counted as CPE credit opportunities. We hope to see you there. Visit recordedfuture.com/predict to register. Again, that's recordedfuture.com/predict to register for Predict 2021. And we thank Recorded Future for sponsoring our show. Jeff Williams is CTO and co-founder at application security platform provider Contrast Security. They recently released the latest version of their Application Security Observability report. Jeff Williams joins me to share what they found.
Observability essentially means, can we see what's going on inside an application? And we focus on security observability. So what we want to do is try to reveal what's going on inside applications from a security perspective. And, it's kind of invisible to most people. When you use your app on your phone or something to send a check or something, or check your balance or something, there's a ton of software. It's not just what's on your phone. It's on the back-end APIs and web applications that are out, running in the cloud somewhere. They connect to back-end systems inside the bank. And that whole software ecosystem is really complicated. There's a ton of security defenses and, unfortunately, a lot of vulnerabilities in that whole environment.
So take us through some of the key findings here. I mean, what are some of the things that you discovered here?
Yeah, so we discovered 34% this year. Last year it was 26%. This year's 34% of applications have serious vulnerabilities. And that is just a jump off the page, holy crap kind of statistic.
Right.
It's shocking that, almost a little over a third of applications have serious vulnerabilities, and 30, and that the number is, on average, like, around 30 vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm.
That's a terrifying number. I mean, if we were building airplanes and every time you did a safety check on the airplane, you discovered 30 vulnerabilities, and 34% of airplanes had these problems, you wouldn't fly.
And so what are your recommendations here? I mean, how do people come at this issue?
Well, from the big picture, I think it's important to understand that there's a risk. First step to solving any problem is recognizing that there is one. So we need really good data, like the data in this report, that drills into exactly what the problems are and where they live, and starts us on detailed metrics that we can understand. So I think the first step is, like, let's get a program in place that allows us to measure our code in our particular organization and understand what we got, and then start improving that over time. And there's kind of three areas that I think are really important to focus on. The first is your custom code, making sure that the code you're writing doesn't introduce new vulnerabilities, like the traditional kinds of application vulnerabilities, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, XXE, SSRF. There's a whole litany of these things. You have to put a program in place to make sure you identify those things and prevent them. The second thing is manage your open source supply chain. You're bringing in all this code, and it's allowing you to very rapidly produce awesome applications. But along with that code comes a responsibility. You've got to make sure that you're keeping it up to date and understanding where those libraries might have known vulnerabilities in them, and updating your applications so that they're using safe versions of those libraries. And then the last piece is runtime protection. So what we talked about so far was kind of in the development process and getting applications into production. But in production, you have to be able to see who's attacking you, what kind of attacks they're sending, and have some defense against those attacks in production. And the average application that we saw there's details on this in the study, of course, but there's the average application has over 13,000 attacks every single month. And while 99% of those are what we call probes, they don't really reach the vulnerability they were targeting. It's still a huge number, and you have to be aware of that. 1% is still a lot of attacks.
That's Jeff Williams from Contrast Security. There's a lot more to this conversation. If you want to hear the full interview, head on over to CyberWire Pro and sign up for Interview Selects, where you'll get access to this and many more extended interviews. And now, a word from our sponsor, Verizon. Mitigate the risks and realize the benefits of digital transformation with the help of Verizon, a leader in cybersecurity managed and professional services for nearly 2 decades. From secure cloud computing solutions to advanced detection and response capabilities, Verizon helps secure data, networks, and infrastructure of many of the world's best-known organizations. Their annual Data Breach Investigations Report is considered the gold standard of cybercrime research, and Verizon's leadership in network, wireless, and IoT connectivity makes it uniquely capable of protecting the ever-expanding attack surface. Let Verizon help you optimize your defenses and achieve the maximum return on your security investments. Learn more at VerizonEnterprise.com/products/security. And I'm pleased to be joined once again by David Dufour. He's the Vice President of Engineering and Cybersecurity at Webroot. David, always great to welcome you back. I think we go back and forth between the general advice that you should not pay the ransom, that paying the ransom is supporting a bad ecosystem. But then the flip side of that is that sometimes you got to get business back in business, and that paying the ransom could be the quickest pathway to that. What's your take on this?
Well, hey, David, it's great to be back. And here's what I think. I think you shouldn't pay the ransom because you've done all of your homework up front on how you're going to recover from a ransomware attack. So you're just going to execute that recovery plan. No need to pay the ransom. Problem solved, right?
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Dave.
Yes, exactly.
Meanwhile, back in the real world,
so
go on.
Right. So honestly, I think you have to evaluate. Can you recover or at least get back to an operational state that gets you to close to normal? Or do you need to pay a ransom? It is literally, that's why they call it a ransom. And you have to make that choice as the leadership of that organization. And I don't think anyone has a right to tell you one way or the other to not pay it. If your business is going to shut down, you got to pay this ransom, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But are you coming at it from the point of view that you should do everything in your power planning-wise, preparation-wise, so that paying the ransom is the last resort? I
am absolutely advocating that. I mean, the most recent attack on the pipeline, they paid a considerable amount and in the millions. And if they'd have just spent a tenth of that up front annually, they would have protected themselves and their infrastructure, which was critical infrastructure to the U.S. So yeah, I think that we pay lip service to it, but we just don't spend the money to protect ourselves.
But what are your recommendations there in terms of those preparations? What are some of the things that organizations should be doing so that they don't have to pay the ransom?
It's the same old backup and restore. Don't just back up your data and think it's good. You got to have a recovery process. You also have to make sure you're patching your critical systems. You can't leave operational infrastructure that has Windows 95 computers that haven't been patched in the last 20 years sitting out there and not expect you're going to get hacked. You've got to be able to understand what you've got, what your exposure is, and back it up. And then also, David, I'm going to go down a little bit of a tangent here. If you are attacked, do you have a team that can communicate with these people? Do you have a plan in place? Not just how would you recover, but how are you going to handle this? Are you just going to get your CISO on the phone? He's going to call up the people that have hacked you? But what's your plan there? There's a lot that needs to be taken into account outside of just your internal planning on how to address it.
Well, and also we've got the whole thing with data exfiltration. I mean, it's not just about the files being locked up. You have to establish what exactly did they take.
That's exactly right. And understanding that from a bigger picture. And that goes to, understanding, where they attacked, how long the file lived there and that kind of thing. So, we're seeing a lot more of this in our threat report. We saw a massive uptick in these type of attacks, which was good because we saw a downtick in other types of attacks, but that means this is where the money is. But David, one thing, I'm really going to go off on a tangent here. I think people need to be careful when they're patting themselves on the back because, one of these attacks, the government got the money back and, the organization that attacked the pipeline, they all but apologized for doing that because they don't want you to know they're out there. They don't want to attack infrastructure. So I personally would not have shouted it from the mountaintops that we were able to get some of the ransom back because I promise you, these folks are 1, annoyed, 2, very capable, and 3, going to make sure that never happens again. So we need to be careful. I'm not saying we shouldn't protect ourselves. I'm not saying we shouldn't get things back, but we need to take a very humble approach to this, make sure we're doing the work properly, and try to protect ourselves because you can't go after these people. They disappear like the wind. So I think people should calm down a little bit and not, if you're a government official, don't be all proud that you got some money back because I'm afraid it's going to come back to bite us on the next one.
Yeah.
That's my opinion, by the way. No one said that. No one. I got to say that right now. I believe that.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Well, David Dufour, thanks for joining us.
Great being here, David.
Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible. If your company would like to reach 250,000 unique listeners every month, send us a note at thecyberwire.com/sponsor. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Be sure to check out this weekend's Research Saturday and my conversation with John Hensinski from Expel. We're going to be discussing their research on stopping ransomware attacks aimed at WordPress CMS installations via drive-by downloads disguised as Google Chrome updates. That's Research Saturday. Do check it out. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Puru Prakash, Justin Saby, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week. It's time to take a moment to tell you about our sponsor, Tanium. Today, no industry is exempt from the growing threat of ransomware. Ransom attacks against critical infrastructure, private companies, and municipalities are alarmingly more frequent and pervasive in 2021. IT and security leaders must act. Understanding network assets and their status is the first step to reducing an organization's attack surface, improving cyber resilience, and accelerating incident response. Check your environment today with Tanium's free cyber hygiene assessment. Visit tanium.com/cyber-hygiene-assessment. And we thank Tanium for sponsoring our show.